Hello everyone, welcome to the learning support video where we'll take a few moments to identify the layers of the epidermis. Now if you had an opportunity to watch the previous video, you'll remember that the epidermis includes either 4 or 5 layers, and we call these 4 or 5 layers the strata. Now, when we use the word strata, it's another way for us to refer to something called a layer. Now, we have again 4 or 5 strata or 4 or 5 layers, and the number of layers is correlated to the component of skin that we're discussing. So, for example, if we're considering the thick skin, that will have 5 layers. And remember that our thick skin is the area of our skin that we'll find on the palms of our hand and the soles of our feet. Everywhere else is considered thin skin. So let's take just a few moments to identify each of the layers that we have for the epidermis. And what we'll do is we'll start at the very bottom, which will be the deep component of the epidermis. Now at the bottom, we have what's called the stratum basale. Now, notice that for the stratum basale, we can almost see the word base within basale. Now, think about this. The basale has what looks to be a simple columnar epithelium. In other words, we have one layer. It is column in shape, and we call it the base or the basale. In other words, it is the basale, or it is this base, on which all of the remaining layers of the epidermis lie. Now, just superior to that, we have the stratum spinosum. And just superficial to it, we have the stratum granulosum. Now, for this particular layer, you'll notice that we have small grains within that tissue layer, which is why we have the term granulosum. Now, just above that, we have our fourth layer, which is referred to as the stratum lucidum. Now, we need to make mention of the fact here that the stratum lucidum is only present in thick skin. So if we're considering our thin skin, this layer will not be visible. But again, it is present for our thick skin. Now, consider the word lucidum. Within the word lucidum, we could almost think of the word lucid, which means clear. And that's what this layer looks like. It's a very clear or translucent layer of tissues. Now, at the very top, we have what's referred to as the stratum corneum. So again, here are the layers of our epidermis from deep to superficial. We have the stratum basale, the stratum spinosum, the stratum granulosum, the stratum lucidum, and the stratum corneum. Now let's take just a few moments and talk about a process that we refer to as keratinization. Now, keratinization is a process that's oftentimes referred to by the term turnover or regeneration. And when we talk about either of those terms, essentially what we're referring to is the process by which we have new skin. And this process occurs roughly every 35 days. So again, we call this process keratinization. And it again occurs roughly every 35 days. Now, to begin, the process of keratinization, or the process of new skin development, begins at the basement layer. In other words, it begins at the stratum basale. Now, here at the stratum basale, we have a protein that becomes activated to kickstart this process. And we call this protein EGF. And EGF stands for Epidermal Growth Factor. And it's this protein that's within the stratum basale that signals the process called keratinization. And so over the process or over the length of time for our 35 days, what we'll begin to see is that the layers of tissue that are in the stratum basale begin to move upwards into our next layer, which is the stratum spinosum. And from the stratum spinosum, our layers of tissues move upwards again into the stratum granulosum. And from the stratum granulosum, if it is present, it moves into the stratum lucidum. And then finally, it would move into the stratum corneum. Now, here's where things get interesting. It is through this process, this upward motion, that we have the further development of a protein called keratin. And it's in the stratum corneum in which we have fully keratinized cells. And so inside of the cells, we have that protein keratin. And after we've reached our 35-day period, we'll see this process called desquamate take place. Now, desquamate refers to the fact that we have tissues that slough off, or it begins to shed essentially. So that's it for this learning support video. I hope it's been helpful in giving you a visual of what our epidermal layers look like. And also, I hope that you have a better understanding of how the process of keratinization or desquamation takes place. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next video.